Thank you, Eric, and we look forward to the reflection session after a little bit later this afternoon. So again, just a reminder, if you've got thoughts in your head, put them in the Slido. If you've got questions, add them to the Slido. But I am now going to introduce our next speaker. So I said, again, I have personal connections to everything. So after the Macondo Well Deepwater Horizon incident, I did some work in Homer, so with people that had been in the rescue vessels for the Deepwater Horizon accident. So it's very close to my heart, as I think that event is to a lot of people in the oil and gas industry. And Thomas Hinterseer is the former director of Transocean and now managing director for, I don't know how you say this, SEDDEP. But his passion is for executive leadership development, so he works with boards and senior executives in bringing around safe outcomes or improving safety performance. So really looking forward to this, and Thomas, over to you.
Good afternoon. It's wonderful to be here, and I would like to take you on a personal journey. And I think all of us who have been in operation for a long time know when the phone rings at 4:30 in the morning, it's not a good idea, it's not a good news, right? That's exactly what happened on the 20th of April 1988, when my phone next to the bedside rang, and I basically picked up the phone, and the message was, we have a platform in the Gulf of Mexico on fire. At that point of time, it was a fire. It was not a major catastrophic event. We assembled in the emergency room with the emergency team, and then as the events unfolded, it became brutally clear that it was far beyond a small fire or a small explosion. It was a dramatic, catastrophic event, a loss of life of 11 people, colleagues, friends, damage to the environment, and the impact on many, many lives and livelihoods around the Gulf of Mexico and far beyond. And what I want to share with you is a little bit the journey of reflection. I came out of 10 years of operations. I was running operations in the Middle East, based in Nigeria, in Egypt. For 4 years, I ran 15 drilling rigs in Nigeria and in the east coast and west coast of Africa. And I thought that, well, safety is probably something which is ingrained in us in operations. But on the reflection of some of the lessons learned, I'm going to share with you, not only from the Deepwater Horizon, but leading up to that from Viper Alpha, it became bluntly obvious that individually and collectively as leadership, there were many things we didn't really look at properly, honestly, and with enough reflection to actually provide an environment and a context to the people who are out on our operations, to actually are entitled and allowed and empowered and feel that they want to do the right thing for the right reasons. They feel left alone, they feel too much pressure on themselves imposed by, and pressure was one of the big things on the doodle this morning, right? So there was pressure, and I'll go into a little bit more detail. There was a lack of leadership. There was a lack of walking the talk from senior executives. And I want to take you on that journey. And I start off with the many facets of why. And all of us in operations, we often ask the question, right? When there's an incident, how many of us ask those questions? Does that sound familiar wording? Why did they not just follow the procedure and think? Why did they not just stop? Why did they not, management, do something about it? They're very basic and essential and classical questions I think all of us have been using over the years. But there's other whys, other WH-whys, which I think we are often ignoring, because this is the easy one, right? Because we have given them all the training, we have given them the means. Why on earth are they not following procedures? If they only had followed procedure, everything would be fine and we would be safe. The more deeper question, I think, and that becomes looking ourselves a bit in the mirror, is why did I not do something to prevent it? What is my role in that context of leading up to the incident? Why did I not see it coming? It's not somebody else. As a senior leader in an organization or responsible for people, there's things we actually need to deeply reflect on a daily basis. What is my role as a senior leader or as a leader? What is my responsibility for my team? And what can I do actively, proactively, in order to actually provide the support? And why am I waiting for somebody else to do it? Why is one department waiting for the supply chain department to do something about it? Or why is it the HSE department responsibility to do something? It often happens that we are waiting for somebody else to do something, rather than getting out of our seat and start doing things ourselves. That was one of the personal reflections coming out. There's things I could have done collectively as leadership team, we could have done differently, should have done differently, in order to prevent the Deepwater Horizon accident to happen. And I want to draw a little bit of a comparison between Piper Alpha, and Jill mentioned it this morning. It was a traumatic event, and those of you in the UK and around, everybody's very familiar with the lost lives there. And the Deepwater Horizon on the 20th of April, 1988. I guess most of you have seen the movie Deepwater Horizon? Yeah? Yes? No? So about, yeah. I must say it reflects quite well some of the conversations and some of the pressures being built up between John Malkovich on the drill floor and the drill teams. And my whole point is I want to drill a bit further about the management errors, not from the guys necessarily offshore, and I'm not interested in the technical elements of this cement shop, etc. But I'm very interested in to know what, from a management perspective, not only offshore, but senior management in town, we missed. Why did the context we created for the people operating on a safe rig get so fundamentally wrong that they made collectively a wrong decision, despite the fact they were technically extremely competent, there had been many, many, many years of experience, but why on earth did they make the wrong decision in that point of time? And I venture to say it is not the responsibility or the fault of the error of the people offshore. It was to a large extent induced by the way we managed and the safety culture we had created in our respective organizations. So just a bit, setting a bit the context, getting you back into the mindset. This is the real footage, which we had on our screens for days and days in the emergency room, showing what
36 hours after the first explosion, time runs out.
But about 10 o'clock in the morning, for about 15 minutes, you really heard a lot of really loud noises. So we knew it was something was going wrong.
As we were combating the fire, we could hear the rig creaking and groaning and settling. And during that period of time, there was multiple explosions, some of which was propelling debris up in the air. Just listening to this rig, you were listening to a ship die.
You hear like cranes falling down and decks collapsing and everything.
At that point in time, I issued a warning to all the firefighting units to be ready for an emergency escape.
Then when at 10:15 the list started changing, you started to see it changing rapidly.
And from my vantage point on the stern, which was directly an eye shot of the lowest point, we could see the aft starboard corner starting to slowly drop into the sea.
It was about 5 or 7 minutes before the complete structure went down.
We started to back off, and by 10:22 she was gone. She slipped under the waves.
That that's a pretty indescribable moment. You see it going down after, these vessels have been fighting the fire for 36 hours and, everybody doing their best to save this.
When you lose a vessel, it's just a somber moment. You feel the loss. You feel the failure. I think, unfortunately for us, we were fighting a losing battle from the start.
You feel the loss, you feel the failure. But most importantly, these were the 11 people, colleagues, friends, fathers, brothers, family members who lost their lives on that tragic event. You cannot imagine, you feel the grief when you walk into the family's office in Missouri and Alabama, and you're sitting in front of the assembled family, and there's nothing you can say. They look at you, and the only word they have is, "Why did you kill my husband? Why did you kill my son?" There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can say other than, why on earth did we miss something that those 11 people are not alive? And that really provided a lot of self-reflection, reflection from our management team, and reflection on what did we miss? How could we end up in a situation where we have to go to the funerals of those 11 people and impose grief not only on their families, but on the wider community with the fishermen and all the pollution which happened subsequently? What did we miss? There was a common theme, I think, which went out throughout the industry since Piper Alpha, that I think collectively we were convinced that if we have the policies and the procedures in place, if we're doing the audits and we're basically issuing new guidelines, new policies, and each time there's an incident, we learn, we issue a new policy, we roll it out, we implement it, that collectively we will be safe, because there was an underlying assumption that as soon as it was rolled out, the people will actually read the policy and the procedure, they will understand it, they will apply it, and therefore we'll be safe. I think there was a common theme throughout many, many years in our industry from Piper. It was simple, it was top-down, but it was a Tayloristic approach. It was the top pyramid decides how it's going to be, we roll it out, and the troops will follow. I think we dearly learned that this is not working anymore in the modern times of management. It might have worked in the 80s and the 90s. It has stopped working because people actually want to be involved in the decision-making, in participating as to how the work is being done. If you look at the incident report from Piper Alpha, right, the Lord Cullen report, the message was very clear. The root cause is inside the organization, the procedures and its culture. And that led, back then, to a huge effort collectively from the industry, right? The safety case, all the procedures, all the bow tie exercises, all the exercises of workforce engagement. A lot of good things happened after Piper Alpha in our industry. And I think many of us thought by doing all those things we learned from Piper Alpha, that as an industry we're not going to see another event similar to Piper Alpha. We somehow got the feeling that we have cracked the nut to a large extent by all the actions we have implemented. Now, if you fast forward, this is the report from the Deepwater Horizon. Not very different, is it? Talking about inside the organization, systemic causes, and if we're not changing fundamentally the way we operate, we are at the risk of having another significant event in our industry. So what happened in those 20+ years that we not necessarily achieved where we thought we were going to be in the safety side? Now I want us, on a very simple, basic thing, go back to what happened in Piper Alpha. We all remember the story, right? There was the issue that people didn't follow the proper handover procedure when they changed out the safety valve at midnight. There was no handover between the incoming crews and the outgoing crews of maintenance. The next morning, pressure built up, the failure failed, and then ignition, and the platform was on fire. So one could argue, well, with good practice, if they only had followed the policy and the procedure, the event wouldn't have occurred. Correct. At the same time, as Jill pointed out this morning, those who survived Piper Alpha were those who did not follow the policy and procedure with regard to evacuation. First thought, food for thought. More interestingly to me is the question of why did they not follow procedures, right? Is it because the guys on the rig are bad people? Because they want to take shortcuts? Because they like to do a bad job? Why did it happen that people didn't follow the process and the procedure and the policies? And you see it in the Lord Cullen report, a number of the underlying reasons which we tried to tackle. And the question personally is, what do I do to prevent those things to happen in my organization, in my team, in my area of responsibility? But more interestingly to me is next doors to Piper Alpha was Claymore, which was roughly 2 miles away from the Piper Alpha platform and was also owned by Occidental Petroleum, but which was used to actually export their production via the pipeline into Piper Alpha and from there onto shore. Now, the crew and the OIM saw that Piper Alpha was on fire. The crew told the OIM, hey, might be a good idea to shut in the production so we're not sending inflammable fluids into the burning platform. It took the OIM 2.5 hours to eventually push the button to shut down. Now, who in this room would argue that sounds illogical? It sounds completely crazy. Why would an experienced person, knowing the fundamental elements of I'm sending a liquid fluid into a burning platform, would not push the shutdown button? So why didn't they do it? I think one of the fundamental reasons for that is, and it comes back in the Deepwater Horizon, I think is the pressure, is the expectation set by onshore management around productivity, about delivering results, short-term results, monetary results. Because what happens if the OIM would have shut down the platform? It takes 3 to 4 days to basically re-ramp up a producing platform, so you lost revenue for 3 to 4 days. It was not in the culture of the organization to actually shut down operations, right? We're going to get by with it. We're going to be the heroes and delivering the results despite. So the question back then is, or today is, can it happen in my team? Am I putting too much pressure on my own organization on delivery of results? And we need to find, of course, the fair balance between delivery and making money, but also operational performance and efficiency and safety. But how much can we put pressure on one or the other before one thing cracks? And too often, safety cracks. And a very simple question, when one of the operations is on shutdown, and we call up from town the person in charge of the operation, what is the generic first question we normally have a tendency of asking? When will you be back on operations? Right? How long will the shutdown be lasting? And we're starting to send as managers, very simple messages, unconsciously, to the guys who are doing the work. What is important is getting back on stream, is making money, being back in operations and efficiency. And that's where I think, if you reflect on our own leadership style, what are the questions we are asking when something happens in the operations? Could the question be, hey Lisa, I know the rig is down, anything you need? What's the help you need? How are things going? Having a different conversation and saying, oh, shit, you're on downtime, how long will you think it will last? And I think those are kind of some of the reflections into our own leadership styles, which might be helpful thinking about. Now, if you fast forward into the Deepwater Horizon, and we talked about complacency this morning. Mark made a very good point, right? I mean, the biggest danger to the Formula One was the complacency after 20 years. And that's not very different on the Deepwater Horizon. If you remember the technical side, the well was supposed to be abandoned, moved on. We were 52 days behind schedule and over 50 million above budget. So that's the context. Was there any pressure from BP onto anybody on the rig to move on quickly? Of course there was. Was it expressed as pressure? Yes. But why were we not able, as management offshore, to resist that pressure? It would be an interesting conversation. At the same time, that rig had 7 years without a safety accident in the Gulf of Mexico. It was the best performing rig. Everybody thought we had cracked it on the rig. Oh, we have 7 years without an LTI. Everything clicks away, performance bonuses are kicking in, etc., etc. Everything is fine. And we had senior management from the Gulf of Mexico, together with the senior management of BP, out on the rig celebrating that performance. What a coincidence. Then comes the why questions, right? Because we all know what happened technically. The cement wasn't dry, the pressure built up. But why on earth would some of the most experienced operational persons in the Gulf of Mexico and the world would make those kind of decisions they made? If you remember, on the well test, they basically had a differential between the shut-in pressure and the pipe pressure. They convinced themselves that the gauges must be wrong. Must be the bladder effect, blah, 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 blah. Right? So the mental model was, I need to get the job done. There's a pressure, an expectation to move on to the next well. And in the film, it comes out very clearly when Malkovich says, you sure you want to get the next contract, Transocean, right? We know we're coming up for a contract renewal. So all those messages are continuously sent. And the people convinced themselves, they repeated the well test, still differential was over 1,400 bars inside-outside shut-in pressure. They convinced themselves the gauges must be wrong. Now it's like an airplane pilot flying a Boeing and seeing that the altitude meter goes down, but he says, I've been a pilot for 30 years. The gauge must be wrong. That's pretty scary, isn't it? So why did the VPs, when they went to the rig, all the senior executives, didn't ask any relevant questions around the work? Very interesting. They came out collectively, Transocean and BP. The only purpose for their visit was to celebrate and give them an award. They were not interested in the operations. They were not interested in talking to people and listening to people while they were on the rig. Wow. Sounds strange, right? When you go to an operation, you want to know what's going on in your operation. The celebration becomes part of the visit, but you really want to engage with people and have a meaningful conversation. So, one question which came to our mind is, do I ask the right questions when I go to the rig? Do I have a meaningful conversation? And do I challenge the green indicators? Do I ask the question, everything is going well, great. Coming back to Eric's point, everything is going well. Explain to me why everything is going well. Let me understand why things are going well. And things will come up in the conversations which might be very interesting to discover. The other question on the Deepwater Horizon clearly was, why did not anybody dare to speak up and stop the operations? All with 20, 30 years experience. The mental model was to get the job done. The mental model was, expectation from management is, we need to move to the next location. They were not feeling empowered and having the trust in senior management of Transocean to actually back them up if they would have said, dear Mr. BP, I don't care, I'll stop the job, I wait until the cement job is dry, or I redo the cement job, I'm not moving. They didn't feel that they're being backed up by senior management in town. I think that was one of the fundamental flaws in the whole system, that as a management in Transocean, we failed the organization. So the thought is, do I respectively, I encourage my people to speak up if something is wrong? Do I listen to this do I have a sense of chronic unease, I would call, right? If something, do I really investigate? Do I question? Do I listen? Do I engage with the people? Why did the company man apply pressure? Very obvious, money, operational performance, and he just wanted to show who the boss is. So the question to, I think, each of us is, do we sometimes put pressure on our own teams, on our own people? Do we sometimes intentionally or unintentionally, by the way we communicate, by the way we celebrate things, by the way we promote people, send conflicting messages? Our natural tendency is to promote whom? Who's the best firefighter? Who's getting out of trouble, right? Who solves the problem quickly? Do we promote the people who keep us out of trouble? Do we really reward people who have steady state, great operations, learn from them, understand why they are so good? They're not necessarily easily promoted, right? We all have our firefighters, right? That's how familiar, right? We like those people who get us out of trouble. The question is, why do we get in trouble in the first place? And why did Transocean leadership fall to the pressure? To me, it's very clear, and I'll show you later as to why what we as Transocean leadership team did not provide from a psychological safety perspective, from a simplicity perspective, from an open conversation perspective for the rig crews. Now that is hindsight, right? The weak signals Eric described, we didn't see it coming. We felt that we were doing well. 7 years without an accident, the TIR rates for the whole company were going down significantly. Our clients told us, Transocean, you're great. TIR rate was the lowest we ever had. So we felt that we basically were doing the right things. And why did the crew ignore the policies and procedures? Best oil field practice. So described with the gauges. To me, again, it's number one, was the mental mindset, we can get it done, we are the heroes, we are delivering. And the second one was the pressure built up collectively on them. And very interestingly, very unknown to many, is that Schlumberger actually chartered a helicopter and removed their team from the rig before the accident because they didn't feel comfortable with the evolution, technically, what was going on in the rig. That's a bold one. There was no real indicator, there was no real evidence that the rig will be on fire 32 hours later. But they basically did not feel comfortable with the technical way the well was managed. Not waiting for the cement being dry, doing some shortcuts, doing this and the other. The guy said, this is technically not right. Remember the Challenger, the reenactment of this morning? And what we did, we put the management hat on rather than the technical hat on. And we made management decisions which cost 11 people their lives rather than technical decision. Technically, nobody in his good mind would have done what our people did. Nobody. So we learned from those disasters, right? The major hazard awareness, education and training, processes, independent regulators, workforce involvement, all those things we learned. Human factors, organizational factors, what Eric described early on, and focusing on leadership and behaviors. And I think that's the one we haven't really cracked yet. If you look at the common derailers, why do operations go wrong? This is a very good paper, I can only recommend it, from Andrew Smith, about the common derailers and on safety. The 5 were the original ones. So inadequate leadership and behavioral skills, defective communications, blindness to inherent risks, organizational complexity, and inappropriate recognition and rewards. I think very classic one. I think in one way or another we have all reflected on those. But I would venture to say there are 2 more additional ones. One is the VUCA world. This volatility, uncertainty, ambiguity, complexity in which our operations and our people have to navigate. Are we sufficiently preparing our people for actually feeling comfortable to navigate in that world, which is completely not predictable anymore? It's not complex, it's almost chaos. We were all used to work with simple equations, right? There's a problem, there's a solution. It's in a complex. We're not in a complex world anymore, right? We're in a VUCA world, or post-VUCA, where things actually move faster, and we need to make decisions without having necessarily all the answers. How do we make sure that we're equipping our people and ourselves with the right mindset, that we are comfortable navigating not only safety, but general operations in this world where there's no more clear yes or no answer? And I think that collectively, I think, is a big challenge for us, because the world is not going to get easier, to the contrary. So we really need to look at those facilities to train our own minds up to change and be open to adaptability, innovation, and trying out in experimentations. But we need to set the boundary for those experimentations as well, because then in safety particularly, they can go very bad, very quickly. So I think that is a big element we really need to ponder on and reflect how we get that done. And then the paradoxical injunctions. This typical what I said, do it fast and do it safely. Those messages we are sending as managers, consciously or unconsciously, on a continuous basis in communications, on promotions, on the way we communicate when things go well or things go wrong. So I think those are two elements we really need to ponder on as to what we can do differently in order to manage that one more efficiently. I would like to give you some examples of what I call failed leadership in our organization. I was one of the 17 directors of the organization, so clearly failed leadership applies. But the fish starts stinking from the head. You know that expression, right? So fast forward 1 year after the event, bonuses are paid out 1 year later after the year is over. We were sitting in the boardroom. The 5 members of the COMEX came in and said, we have great news. Oh, what is that? Great news after a year of horror. Oh, the board approved a bonus payout for safety. So some of us kind of said, what? Now, the board approved a bonus payout of 67%. Wow. After having killed 11 people? Damaged the environment, blah, 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 blah. So we had interesting, lively conversations amongst ourselves. There was a real defense by the board and the senior executives saying, well, this was not our fault. Interesting. It was BP's fault. We did everything we could, but BP told us to do that, and therefore it's BP's responsibility. Based on, of course, the legal battles ongoing in the United States, that it was legally speaking. But we're not talking about legal, we're talking about moral, we're talking about ethics, right? It took a week, 1 full week, until the bonus was then finally given to charity. 1 week. Now you're talking about a culture in an organization. When you're having those kind of conversations after having lost 11 colleagues and done harm to many, many people and livelihoods, why do we even have to have that conversation? Clear example, something was wrong in the way we approached leadership, not only on safety, but leadership. You can Google it, it's publicly available information, you can read the story. It's not very well known, but I think that to me is a clear expression of what did we miss from a leadership perspective. The second one was the complexity of our field visits and the way we engaged in conversations. We had a policy and a procedure in Transocean which was 46 pages long, how to do a field visit to a rig. And it was timed. If you come to the rig, you spend 50 minutes with a company man to say what's going on. You spend 20 minutes on the drill floor. You spend this much in the warehouse to check the inventory. We had 46 pages of policy how to visit and how to spend time on the rig. What we didn't tell people is be human, be authentic leader. Be out there and be within the moment with the people. Listen. Do not be out there checking stuff and doing a dog and pony show. But we had a 46-page policy. So we all felt good about it. We know how to do a rig visit now, right? It was a mechanical rig visit. It was not authentic leadership. It was not coming from the heart. It was pure ticking the box. I guess we're not the only organization having some policies and procedures around visiting or installations, etc. Right? So that was one of which we abolished very, very quickly. The internal audit process. Hindsight was a disaster. Typical audit. The man and the woman in black came in from headquarters, 5 days on the rig, and they came up with a 25-page report as to what is going wrong on the rig, and maybe 3 lines of here's some good points at the end. Now, they always started with the 3 good points and then 25 pages of bad points, right? So that was and we said, this cannot work. There was no trust. There was no learning opportunity, most importantly. Because the people came out and everybody was scared. If I'm being written up and have less than 95% compliance, it's bad for my bonus, it's bad for the reputation, I'm not getting a promotion, I'm the bad person. So we said, there's something wrong, because we're not hearing the truth, we're not learning. So we changed completely the process and basically started doing peer audits. So we had a drilling crew from a rig in Indonesia visiting, we didn't call it audit, doing a peer visit to a rig in Nigeria. That changed fundamentally the whole culture and the whole level of conversations, because there was trust. One OEM from one rig visiting another OEM for another rig. Lecture learning, transformation of information, and a lot of things surfaced by those meaningful peer-to-peer conversations. And most importantly, it created trust, because the headquarter audits really were tough on people, and we didn't get any value. Now, safety observations. I think all of us have start card, stop card, whatever system we're using. We had a fantastic system in Transocean, which said every person on any of our installation has to issue 2 start cards per day. Guess what did we get? 2 start cards per day, as per expectations. But those start cards literally were written on the helicopter ride to the offshore platform, because the guys had time, so they wrote a little bit slip, trip, and falls on handrails and the easy ones. No added value. So we stopped that and said, what's the real purpose of a start card observation? Or stop card observation, depending what you use. And we went through an 8-month process of engaging with everybody, saying, what's the purpose? What do the learning opportunities, the sharing opportunities, and really having in-depth conversations around the real issues when you do a start observation tour. It changed fundamentally the approach, and we had significantly more start observations afterwards, and we had, most importantly, qualitative feedback, rather than the typical slip, trips, and falls, and safety goggles and hard hats. But it took 8 months to get that level of trust established and that level of understanding as to, hey, it's actually for the people around on an installation we're doing that. You're doing it for yourself. You're not doing it to tick a box for an auditor or having the statistics in headquarters on a monthly basis in the green. But that's how we operated at the time. Process and procedure is important, but far too complex. We had an HSE manual of 450 pages. Well, who reads 450 pages of an HSE manual? Difficult. It was sitting on each of the bookshelves, but it was not a living document. It was just there to be seen, we have it. So we again scrapped that HSE manual. We went to 65 or 70 people around the world on the operation, said, what are the 10, 15 things which keep you out of harm's way? What are the 10, 15 non-negotiable procedures you really need to do and follow from A to Z, because those are the ones which keep you out of harm's way? It took 9 months, and the manual was 45 pages at the end. It was in a pocket book, everybody had it, and it was the essential policies and procedures to keep us safe. We had the permit to work offshore. You need 17 signatures on it. 17! Now, guess what happened? Normally, you should go out to a department where the work is actually happening, you do the inspections with the team concerned, in the site where you do the work, right? And then you sign off because you have analyzed the risks, blah, blah, blah. Now, what happened, because it was so complex, it was done in the morning meeting at 8 o'clock in the tool pusher's office. Everybody was sitting there because anyhow they were there. They discussed the job and they signed it off in the tool pusher's office at 8 o'clock in the morning for the whole day. Completely counterproductive. But we were in compliance because we had the 17 signatures on the work permit. So if something went wrong, hey, everybody was there, everybody has signed off. Nonsense. Utter nonsense. But it was not the fault of the people, because people are intelligent. They operate in the context we as leaders create, and they want to do a good job. Fundamental basic, right? But if we create a context where we ask them to do those things, people are smart, they will adapt to it. And because they want to be protected. That's a very human nature. So we changed that as well. And we had a terrible culture of a learning organization. 3 weeks before the Macondo accident, we basically had a blowout in the North Sea. The only difference was there was no source of ignition, therefore we didn't have a catastrophe. But we had the mud up on the monkey board. But nobody in our organization knew of that accident outside the North Sea. So 3 weeks later, nobody learned from that. We didn't have a learning culture as an organization. We didn't share, we didn't learn from neither the good things nor the bad things. So we had to change that fundamentally as well. And the paradoxical injunctions were part of our modus operandi. We promoted the wrong people, we sent messages left, right, and center around efficiency and performance and client satisfaction, right? Customer focus, as we call it. But at any price was a little bit the mantra at the time. So I think the point there is I can delegate responsibility, but I cannot delegate accountability. So I can ask other people to do things, but at the end of the day, it comes back to me as a leader. I'm accountable for the results. I'm accountable for what people do under my area of influence. That's a big one. And people operate in the context we give them. We create the culture as leaders as to how it's going to be and how it is in our organization. The good, the bad, and the ugly. That's our responsibility. And we have to have, I think, a deep reflection as to what our individual and collective leadership obligation is when we run operations. And I venture to say that it's not happening enough, not happening every day. And I think it's a real opportunity to have a deeper reflections, individually and collectively, as to what can I do? Where do I go from here? It's a visible leadership element, I think. And we're all busy. We're all doing plenty of things. But is there one or two things where we are visibly seen as being agency leaders? Are we walking the talk? Or are people saying, he or she talks about safety, but at the end of the day, after the last company function, we had a bottle of wine and he drove home by car after having drunk a bottle of wine. Does it happen? Maybe yes, maybe no. But what we are continuously observed as senior executives, so as leaders, by our teams. Are we walking the talk? Are we authentic leaders? Are we credible? That's what I refer to develop this inner dialogue. I think, are we asking ourselves at least once a day the questions, where am I on my leadership journey? Where am I am I providing the right tools, the right culture? Am I having the right conversations with the teams around me? And when we have meetings, are we listening or are we talking and trying to send messages? And when we say, are we listening, are we active listening and compassionate listening? Or we were just pretending to be listening because we still want to pass a message? Open view of the underlying purpose and sense of the procedures. So I think that is an obvious one. We need to challenge it. And having those open safety conversations. Walk the talk, as we said, and avoid these paradoxical injunctions, right? So next time when something is on downtime, maybe we ask a different question than when are we back on operations. I, of course, continue to drive process safety. And the worst thing, I think, to end up is to me, if I wake up in the morning and have to ask myself the question, if only I had done something different. If only I would have. Because then it's too late. If only I would have had a different rig visit. If only I would have had a different level of conversation. If only I would have. This is a question I wish nobody should have to ask him or herself. Because then it's too late. And so I wanted to share that with you. So it's a bit of a personal journey, personal reflections, but also I think a deep attachment to those people. And I think we owe it to them, not only not to forget them, but build a structure where it doesn't happen again. Thank you.